The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome everyone, my name is Stephen Halasnik and I am co-founder and managing partner of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions is the leading provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits. Our line of credit program is easy, inexpensive, and costs nothing until used, making it a great cash backup plan for your nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the program, please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And if you decide to apply today, we will even give you a $250 credit on file that you can use later. Or feel free to give us a call at 862-207-4118. Just remember, the time to set up your line of credit is today, not when the emergency that you have actually comes up. And considering that it doesn't cost anything to set up, and if you're not using it, you're not required to use it, it makes complete sense. I can't tell you how many times I get clients who sign up the right way in advance and then use their line of credit because they didn't think they were going to have to later on and come back and say, thank God I got the line of credit in place. And then I also have the opposite effect where people come to me in an emergency because they didn't move forward originally. So again, please consider it, nonprofitmbapodcast.com if you'd like to learn more. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with Tom Ahern from Ahern Communications. The New York Times calls Tom Ahern one of America's most sought-after creators of fundraising messages. He is the author of 6 well-regarded how-to books on communicating profitably with donors. Tom, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I look forward to this.
Before we even get into today's topic, and today's topic is the fundraising dilemma. People donate, continue donating, then never donating again. Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my background is a little different than a lot of people in the fundraising sector. And by the way, this seems to surprise a lot of people. The nonprofit sector is now the 3rd largest employer in the United States.
Wow.
So it is a large and very quickly growing sector. I think we have now in the last 15 years doubled the number of nonprofits in the United States. And that's in some ways a reflection of increased population, but also increased problems because a lot of nonprofits are there to solve some or try to solve some specific problem that has emerged. My background is actually hard marketing, commercial marketing, selling stuff. And I was trained in that field as for instance, direct mail copywriter. I went and got an advertising certificate from Rhode Island School of Design. It took 4 years of night classes and getting hammered a lot by my very tough professors who would not accept anything but surprises. And I learned my trade and I started practicing my trade, and I was selling all sorts of things, including industrial roof membranes, luxury yachts, adult education, and it was working. I had a small agency with a partner, and we did very well. We managed over a course of about a decade to win 3 large international awards for results, not beauty contest awards, but we actually brought in, the revenue and the customers that improved results for these businesses. Then my wife, who had been a so-called director of development, chief fundraiser for a regional theater company, she had been an independent consultant in board development and fundraising for, at that point, about 12 years. And she leaned over, we had home offices, so it was yelled up the stairs, and said, could I help with one of her clients who needed some direct mail written? And I said, yeah, of course, I guess. And I then spent about 6 months reading everything I could get my hands on to kind of update the fundraising part, because I hadn't really done fundraising. It is a different specialty. And once I sort of had acclimated myself to the realities of the fundraising world, I started working in that world, and eventually, that about 5 years, that became exclusively my customer base.
Oh. So when we look at the topic, which is, we're going to get into really the nuts and bolts of our topic, the fundraising dilemma. People donate, continue donating, then they never donate again. If you had to put your finger on one thing that, let's just talk about smaller nonprofits under $5 million, do wrong
Mhm.
when it comes to this topic, what is that one thing?
Well, there's a favorite villain here, which is that you are not very good at thanking people for their response. But I think the answer is actually a little more complicated than that. I was just looking at the data yesterday, in fact, and the it has been consistent for a very long time that of first-time donors, only three or two of those first time donors make a second gift. Now, that has gotten worse with the advent of what's called peer to peer fundraising, which is, sponsor me. I'm going to run in this charity race. Will you throw in $10 or $25 and sponsor me? And I'm going to raise money for charity. Well, that's peer to peer. That you're talking to your friends. They don't really have a connection to the charity. They have a connection to you. And so, if you're not coming back to them in a peer to peer environment and saying, well, okay, I asked once and you responded, will you respond again? Then there's no real motivation for that particular donor to stick with the charity. That's one problem. Another problem is people sometimes are responding. For instance, the Haiti earthquake, everybody remembers, it was turned out to be a fundraising phenomenon. People from all over the world were sending money to the Red Cross as fast as possible because it was being dragged through the front pages of the news. Now, did those people give twice? No, that was an impulse purchase. And I think a lot of times charity is something of an impulse purchase. We see an ad, we feel sad, and we say, I'm going to do something about that. And you do it for reasons of your own. Sometimes it's because, as one of the Christian faith based charities says, you are, quote unquote, following in the footsteps of your faith. Jesus said to help the poor, so you're helping the poor. And every major religion has a strong theme of helping the poor. Muslims, Jews, everybody does this. So that is, sometimes these are impulse purchases. We kind of look at it as where did they go when they don't make that second gift? And the answer is, well, they never intended to make a second gift.
Hmm. Yeah, so there's a multitude of reasons. I mean, since you've been doing this, what do you usually counsel your clients to do about it?
Well, these days there is a real answer. One is, first of all, try to get the right people in the door in the first place. That is, people who have some stronger emotional reason for identifying with your particular charity. And the second is you would emphasize monthly giving over annual giving. The reason being that if your biggest problem, one of your biggest obstacles is that most people, the majority of first time donors, do not make a second gift, which the data has supported for decades. Then how do you get around that? Well, you get around it with signing them up in the first place for multiple gifts, which is what monthly giving does.
Yeah, you know what, this is like I think my 50th podcast, and it, the theme that there's a couple of things that have come out from experts like yourselves and our guests, and one of them is you have to take a step back and understand who you are, what you're about, and also identify the type of donors that you really, really want. And, I think the tendency for most nonprofits is to just go out and try to get any money you can from anybody, whether it be $10, $100, you certainly like $100,000, but you just go and you go without thinking. Whereas I think the right move, and based on what you're saying to me, Tom, is to really pick and choose after you've done the homework of saying, this is who we are, this is what we do, and these are the type of donors we want, and then going out and trying to search for those type of people. Is that correct?
Yeah. Acquisition, that's the part where you're bringing in new donors, first time donors, is it's a very, very, very hard place to work. And I'll give you an example. In direct mail, for instance, I've had several clients say, "Oh, it is just so awful. We're doing so poorly. We send out our appeals and we only get a 1% response." And that
Mhm.
means they sent out 100 and one gift came back, right? And they consider that, because that number does seem quite low, 1%, a failure. Now, the truth is, and this is where it's very important to know what your industry metrics are. The truth is, that's a roaring success in direct mail world.
Yeah.
Acquisition is tough, tough, tough. You usually spend $2 to raise $1, and you're going to be in the red until you get those people to their second, third, fourth, fifth gift. And so the question is, what are you doing with the rest of your relationship with these 1% people that do say, "Okay, I'll trust you." First date gift, and usually that first date gift is quite small. In the United States, the average gift for a donor who gives less than $1,000 is $25. That's a first date gift. And yet, we know from different data that the major givers of tomorrow for your organization, the people that are forking over 1,000, 10,000, 25,000, 100,000, maybe putting you in their will, those people start as a $25 gift, and then they learn to love you. Now, why do they learn to love you? In part, that's up to you. You have to love them first. And if you like your donors, they will like you back, and they will express that affection through giving.
Yeah, I think that most nonprofits use like a funnel system, right? You kind of get as many people as you can into the top of the funnel, and then what spits out at the bottom are people that donate. And then when you get those people who donate, you go through them and see if any of them have a bigger potential to have a rather large donation. Um, and I think I was suggesting that you know you don't want to put people in the top of the funnel that only make $25,000 a year. So be a little bit more selective.
Perhaps the fascination with wealth distorts, I think,
Okay.
fundraising quite a bit, and
Mm.
it is not that you are trying to raise money from people that only have a small amount and are just barely making their bills. They do contribute.
Yeah, I was exaggerating, but yes. I get you.
But the
Yeah.
the truth is, and that's why let's take a sidebar here. One of the things you'll hear often from, particularly from board members hoping to come up with solutions to how do we close the budget gap, is we need younger donors. Well, you don't actually need younger donors. People age into their prime giving years, and those prime giving years start at around age 55. Before then, they're building their life and they're spending pretty much everything that's coming in the door. So, what you're looking for are people that have surplus income, whether it's a little bit or a lot, is kind of not all that relevant. People give to you based on their capacity, on what is surplus to them. So if I give you $10,000, it's because I can afford to give away $10,000 and it doesn't change my lifestyle. Same for $10, same for $10 million. None of these are changing anybody's lifestyle, these gifts. And so, my view of this, and I work with a lot of community foundations, and I find community foundations kind of stuck in that we must chase the rich rut. Look at their boards; they're typically flushed out with people of wealth from their own communities. And my feeling, and this is based on data, not on my just opinions. I try to have no opinions, frankly, is that they're missing a huge opportunity, which is the middle of the pyramid. Most of the country, let's put aside the gutting of the middle class, which seems to be front page news. Most of the country is middle class, and
Mm.
an estate in the United States will probate probably for $1 million on average. And so can an estate like that, for instance, put a gift in its will for charity and not hurt any heirs? Yeah, of course. They could easily put in a $25,000 gift or 2% of the estate gift. And that's big bucks. Now, most charities, for instance, don't chase bequests very effectively or rigorously, because they think of it as tomorrow dollars. We're not gonna see that for 20 years. Well, that's not true. Actually, the pipeline starts to flow. If you're promoting bequests, your pipeline of those bequests starts to flow within 3 to 4 years, and it doesn't stop flowing. And there's a good reason for that, and mostly because people update their wills as they get to the what the CDC says is going to be their lifespan. And so, yes, they update their will, and 2 years later, in fact, they do die, and then the will is probated and the charity benefits. So, there's a lot of there's a lot of assumptions in the charity world, and you mentioned that most of your charities are a certain level and below, 5 million annual in revenue and below. Those are the ones who tend not to have too much professional expertise on the inside. Well, they can't afford it, to be frank. I mean, if you're looking at a big charity like some of my clients, they have staff that do everything. And those staff, they're all professional, they're all well paid, and they run analytics all the time. A smaller charity doesn't do that, so they often run on presumptions and assumptions, and most of those are not actually actionable or even right.
Yeah, so I want to go back to something you said early on in the conversation, and that is, the last part of today's topic, and we're not talking about the last part now, but the last part is then never donate again. From what I hear you saying, uh, it's the thank you that causes them never, I'm using that
Hmm.
like, of course we're not just saying, oh, thank you, right? It's the process of the thank you that causes them never to donate again. Is that what you're saying in regards to that part, for the number one reason?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So what?
Stephen. The basically, if you give me a lousy customer experience, I won't be your customer again. and of course the reverse is true. So you're trying to give them a surprisingly warm welcome to the family that makes up your donor base. The family is the staff, the people served, the people that support the charity. All of these people together make a unit that is trying to accomplish something in the world and make things a little better for somebody. And so one of the constructs that you use is, we're going to welcome you to this family. You're going to be an important part of this family, because the truth is most charities have a fairly small donor base. Even large institutions like, let's say, a university, the number of people giving is relatively small. The average for universities in the United States, now the average is not is about 12% of alumni give, right? Now it can be way better than that. Like Princeton, it's around 63% of alumni give, but there's a reason for that. And part of the reason is that university has worked very hard since the 1930s to inculcate incoming freshmen with the concept that charity matters, that philanthropy has built that university, and that someday it will be their turn. Right?
Yeah. So makes sense. How would you prioritize? So what are some of the things that you would do to make your thank you process deeper, more better? I tell you, I think most nonprofits would say that's the fun part of the job, and yet we're not doing it very well. So why?
Um,
Why are nonprofits first not doing a great job with the quote unquote thank yous?
Yeah, well, they don't realize how important it is. There's actually three parts to donor communications, and they work together as a system. They're not isolated. The three things are: you ask for my help, you thank me for that help if I give it, and then you report back to me what the philanthropy has done, because we know from repeated donor surveys over the years that the number one doubt and doubt is not a good thing. It erodes trust. Um, is about, what did you do with my money? They don't know.
Yeah.
You know. And a lot of charities, because they don't have training in the marketing communications aspects of donor communications, they don't realize what a black hole that is when you don't report back. So they do a very poor job of it. What they talk about is their programs and all the wonderful things they're doing inside. How great the staff is, how great the mission is, and all the rest of it. They don't talk about how important, for instance, donors who get past their inertia are. I mean, the biggest problem in fundraising is not that you didn't make a strong ask. The biggest problem is that most people, it's much easier to do nothing than to do something. So you're getting killed by inertia all the time by everybody, even if they were naturally inclined to care. And after all, we are empathetic creatures. We're a social, animal, and we tend to, if somebody says, "Oh, somebody's hurting and you can help," the tendency is to go, "Well, I should do that." But then, how many actually do? A fairly small number.
Do you think that that nonprofits should be focusing less on getting new donors and more on the thank you portion?
They need to focus on those things equally. What mostly happens, in my observation, is They may have gone to a conference or two and heard this very same kind of advice about thanking being so important, and then but maybe 90% of people who hear that advice don't actually execute well on it. For instance, we know some research indicates that if you call, doesn't mean you have to actually reach anybody, you can leave a message. But if you call a new donor within 48 hours thanking that donor, you're much more likely to get a second gift from that donor. And in part, that's because you've given them a surprising experience. Uh, when a board member calls me because I've made a gift to a new charity, they are one out of 100 charities that I've given to that did that. So it's an unusual event and it's memorable as well. Um, so the next time you come and ask me, which you probably need to do more often than you think, a lot of charities are very, particularly at the small end, are very shy about asking. They're almost embarrassed. And that's not how you do this. This is in marketing 101. You keep coming back to me probably 2, 3, 4 times a year asking for my help. Now, if at the same time you're not coming back to me when I do help and saying, thank you, we love you, we love you, we love you, or you're not coming back to me with any kind of reporting on what philanthropy is doing in the world to make the world a better place, well, you're going to, your response rates are going to start to erode.
Yeah, and I will add to this, Tom, too. I had two situations. One of them is uh, the advice. One of the not advice. Yeah, I guess I would say advice is that it can't be a numbers game. Like sending out an email thanking me and about the donations I make. My one of the uh, big places that I donate quite about a bit of money to is my university. And I'm sorry, but sending out an email to say thank you for the thousands of dollars that I've sent to them this year, it doesn't really cut it. You need to be personable,
Yes, you do.
and it needs to be a person, and that's a little, like you said, I like to know, how my money helped. So the second scenario I have just recently happened. So my mother is 97 years old. She's doing well, but a year ago we decided to get her a live-in, and the woman who lives there, fantastic woman from Ghana. I met her daughter, and her daughter has two uh, totally amazing foster children.
Hmm.
And they one of the boys, who's 9 years old, has severe ADHD. But I can't tell you how respectful these kids were, how affectionate, how funny, how personable. It was amazing. I was so impressed. And I honestly, I have two good kids myself, so it's not like I'm saying, oh boy, I wish my kids were like that. These kids were really, really good. And I'm going to say to her now is, tell me what you need help with. Tell me what financially the kids need. Right. And the reason why I want to do that is because I can see where my money is going. I can see that I feel like it doesn't mean I'm going to give up on all the other charities I give up to, but I can see something tangible that really I made a difference with. And I think that's what we're all looking for in our donations is make me feel good about the money, and I'll give you more. And so I really believe what you're saying, Tom, about the thank you being the core of fundraising.
Yeah, it's the emotional. What you were talking about for your university, if you can see the form behind that email that came to you, if you can see, oh, dear, fill in blank
Yeah.
first name, then that's not a good thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a dead giveaway. All of us are trained. Most of us we get an enormous amount of activity in our mailbox and in our inbox for email, and people, we're trained to recognize the robot that is behind some of this stuff. And is it easy to do it the other way? Well, it's a cultural shift. One of my clients is a big charity that raises money for refugees here in the United States. It raises money in the United States for refugees overseas, and they have a staff that does nothing but call first-time donors within 48 hours, because they trust the research, they respect the research, and asks those donors, why did you make that first gift? Now, that's an interesting question, and it comes out of a researcher in London named Richard Radcliffe, and he has spoken to over 25,000 donors in focus groups about their motivations for giving. And one of the things he said, based on that experience, his depth of experience, is that donors are, quote unquote, these are his verbatim words, staggeringly ignorant of the causes they support. But he didn't mean that was a bad thing. He meant that they were giving for their own reasons. They were giving because of values. They were giving because of personal experiences. They were giving because they were moved. They're giving for all sorts of reasons: fears, hopes, anger, etc., etc. And he said the best question you can ask them is, why did you make that first gift? Because it was triggered by something. And it was triggered by something inside them. And the more you understand the motivations of your donors, the more likely it is you can say things to them that actually matter to them.
Yeah, I know with the university in particular, they have 550,000 alumni. And I know what happens is, the $5,000 that I donate a year isn't enough for them to get me on a higher priority list of
Yeah.
them, so which is funny because like one of our friends, close friends, is in fundraising at another smaller college, and she's like, and it's a prestigious college, but she's like, if someone donated $5,000 to our college, I'd be on the phone with them thanking them.
Of course.
So at the issue you have at major university, but the reason I raise that issue is people who have, I'm sure many nonprofits all have this issue about a cutoff point, of saying, okay, well, this person donated $25, should that person get a personal call? If I have, 2,000 donors, I'm never going to get to everybody. And so they have to have some type of cutoff point, right?
Yeah, they think that. I think I would put that on its head and say, how can we thank
Yeah.
every new donor? You're talking about 2,000 donors. There are, at the size of the charities that you are serving, that would be the 5 million and below, it's unlikely that they have 2,000 donors,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I know, very high-powered fundraisers, very successful fundraisers. That is, they're bringing in a ton of money, 10 times their salary, which is kind of a benchmark for an effective professional fundraiser, 10 times their salary. And what do? Well, they start every day with phone calls to donors. And they do that every day. And they make one or two or three, whatever their run rate is. And, in a working year, you can call a lot of people. And if you don't reach them, you email them. But you don't email them from your robot self. You email them from your personal self. I just wanted to say hi, and I know, it's how you doing? which is one, in the pandemic age has become one of the favorite, instant openers for email subject lines.
Yeah, there was a company that I had on here, which I thought was a really good. It's an Australian company. I had them on the podcast, and their name is Bonjourno. And what they do is they allow you to really easily create a video using your phone and getting it out to your donors. And it it was like the thing that I thought was really good about it. This is not so much about a thank you, although you could do that. This was also about showing where your money went and how it really helps somebody. And I think there is, you know, if you can't do the personal phone calls, maybe there is some type of technology out there that can make it a little bit more personable. Maybe that helps. I know that's not sending the right message about what we're talking about today. Put a technology thing behind it. I think we're talking about being more personable. I mean, would you agree, Tom? That's really what we're saying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're trying to be human. You're an
Yeah.
organization doing, let's hope, amazing work, and you can't do that work. And this is actually a core message that a lot of charities don't promote very well. You cannot do that wonderful work without the support of a lot of hearts out there that are saying, yes, let's get this done. Let's get this problem solved. And many charities, what they focus on is how good do we look, which is not, if there's no obvious need for my help, then I will give it to somebody else. People who are reliably generous, who make gifts to many charities or even a handful of their favorite charities, they are not, they're not going to stop giving. They are charitable. That's part of their identity. But what they will stop is giving to you because you're not providing them with any emotional gratification. It's the robot talking.
Let me ask you a question. Um, this Maybe we could start off with the smaller nonprofits you've dealt with. I know that you're still pretty big size, but if I went to them, or if you went to them and said, "What's your thank you policy?" Would they have that in place? Would they know what that
No.
meant?
No, and I'm not personally. I'm kind of policy averse. Uh, it's I hate the paperwork aspects of it. But knowing that the research supports that 48-hour window where you respond to somebody who is a first-time donor and say, basically welcome them to the family, knowing that's the first policy you need. Second policy is we also have to report back to them. So, what's our mechanism for that? And it doesn't have to be fancy pants. I'm not talking about, full color printed newsletters and all the rest of it, although sometimes that can do very well for charities. Uh, all it needs to be is a personal letter from the executive director, and that doesn't mean the ED has to write it. Just somebody who is articulate and friendly should write it, and then the ED just signs it. But basically, catching people up. Hey, you're part of the family. Here's that family Christmas letter that we send out every year. Only we're going to do it, 4 times a year because lots happening here. And thanks to you, there's your most important. What is that called? Boy, because there's an acronym in donor communications, BOY, because of you. It's kind of a default, and it's how if you're having a kind of a dull day, you can start your statement to a donor with that, because of you. I'm writing to you today to tell you, I'm not asking for another gift, although we did throw in an envelope just in case, but I'm writing to you to let you know what's happening
Yeah,
because of you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Well, I think this is a subject that can go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I think we just touched upon the main theme, which is, having, thought through your thank you, making it personable. It's really all the time we have for you, our listeners today. But I'd like to thank so very much Tom Ahern from Ahern Communications, AHERN, for coming on today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. If you like today's podcast, please also consider giving us a review to make sure we get the word out. The Nonprofit MBA podcast has become extremely popular. I'm very proud of it. And I think if you're an executive director and you just listen to all the guests that we have, you will really learn a lot. It's great, thought-provoking stuff. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Tom, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I have a website, as everyone does, and it is if you just Google Tom Ahern, you'll go right to it, I'm sure, and it has the URL there. I just gotta here's how bad I have to check my own URL. It is ahern.com, COM. And if you go, you can sign up for my newsletter. It's quite popular. It's a how-to newsletter, and it's got about 11,000 subscribers, and it comes out, when I have something to say, and it's meant to be helpful.
Very good. Tom, thanks for coming on today.
Well, Stephen, it's been my pleasure, and thank you for doing this.
I want to thank all of our listeners out there. You guys have doing all the heavy lifting on a constant basis to make the world a better place. Don't forget to pat yourself on the back. I know you always think there's more to do and you can do more, but it's been a difficult year, and we really all need to do our part, and you guys do the heavy lifting again. So everybody, have a fantastic day today.